Good evening. Welcome back to Protracking with Syphus. Thank you if you've been here before for the last one, which was the first one. And thank you if you're just joining me for the first time. I got lots of good feedback from that one, lots of good technical feedback. Things are a bit quiet. They should be a bit louder now. I've got a bit more compression on my voice, so that should be better. I've got some sidechain compression running against the Amiga, so that should be better. Some of the noise from the Amiga is gated, not too much of it. That's quite a tricky balance because the Amiga is really noisy, fairly noisy. I've made the whole thing a lot less noisy by eliminating some ground loops that I had in the room, which means that I'm limited by how long a certain pair of batteries lasts. Excuse me. Which is probably good, because otherwise I would go on far too long. So yeah, I think we've got enough time to do what we want to do on these batteries. Batteries are great because it means that you can take things out of your chain which are sharing a ground loop from the mains power that they get and giving you a lot of noise, which we had last time. So you shouldn't be able to hear much of the Amiga right now doing nothing. You can probably hear a little rumble when I move this up and down because the graphics chip is interfering with the audio output. But hey, that's part of the fun. That's why we're here, to have fun with Amigas. So yeah, and another bit of advice I got was to let things run for a little while, give people a chance to join before I get stuck into anything. I'll do that. Also, I need to read the questions from the screen more and answer them, read them out to people who might not be able to see them on the screen and answer them. I'm going to do that as well, because I'm determined to be a good boy streamer and do this properly. But mostly it's about using Protracker to make music, and on a whim today I thought, hey, let's try something I haven't tried before. Not like I've got something to prove, like you can do everything in Protracker, so you should, but hey, it's cool to do a new style in a tracker. It's always a good way to find new limitations or new possibilities in a bit of software or any tool chain or workflow that you haven't come across before. As a composer, if I've got some downtime, I will often set myself an artificial brief to do a pastiche of a style, so that if a client comes along and says I need that style, then I've got a bit of experience in putting that together. So I thought I would go for the kind of lo-fi, if I say trip hop, that'll age me massively, or accurately. Jazz hop is a word that gets thrown around. Study beats is one I've seen used quite a lot. And hey, I'm not sneering, this is cool. These streams have billions of views. I don't know if the composers are getting compensated for that, but they've got usually you get an anime GIF that loops. It's usually somebody writing at a desk and a cat going every so often, and a nice scene out the window, and it's very relaxing, and that's good. People should relax. And I guess it's Reddit and SoundCloud. This has really started to spring up as people, every couple of years there's a new bunch of people discover and mythologize older samplers and ways of making music. So the Boss SP202 and the 303 got a big boost in popularity and consequently eBay prices when Jay Dilla and Madlibs were using them. I'm not sure Jay Dilla used them as much as people think that he did, but that's part of that whole myth. And they're lovely pieces, and I I think about them a lot. The way I think about the Amiga, they're polyphony limited heavily, 4 channels I think on those first two. I've used the 202 quite a bit. I haven't used the 303. I had a 404 and sold it. I've had almost every small phrase sampler that exists at one point or another. I still have a couple. I might do a show about those sometime in conjunction with the Amiga. But again, it's a closed kind of box in terms of workflow with limited possibilities, and you have to find a way around those limitations. That's what we're doing in the Amiga. Protracker is basically a sampler. It just happens to have some crazy sequencing abilities that most of those hardware samplers don't have. And yeah, it lends itself quite well to the sort of lo-fi hip-hop thing. What I think we'll do, I mean, I think it'll involve adding noise to this already noisy workflow, adding some vinyl noise, because the kids love that. I love that. That'll be interesting. And I think that I'll be able to go through a few tricks that that will be useful to us in other styles and genres, and figure out the Protracker way. I've been thinking about this today. I've got some ideas how we'll do it. Figure out the Protracker way of doing it, and see how much control we can get over those tricks. Yeah, so I hope this is all sounding a bit better, a bit stronger than it did last time. I'm going to fire up Protracker and play some music, see if my side chaining is working, so that you can hear me. Now, this isn't the machine that crashed, this is the other one. I don't think it's going to crash again. I don't think so. What's that? Oh, well, this hasn't got any of this stuff on it, has it? Yeah, it's got something on it. Oh, it's got a compact flash card here. A compact flash card, which goes inside the compact flash card to PCMCIA converter, which goes in the side of the Amiga, which is great. It's the only machine of this era, this and the Amiga 600 are the only machines of this era that have a means of getting files on and off that still is really easy. I can stick that in a USB card reader on my PC or Mac and just FAT32 drop files on and off. That's handy. Yeah, hi Keto. TechnoSound Turbo is you spotted right here. I'm not using that tonight, mainly because I've got such a limited space back to front on my desk. I always have a MIDI keyboard lined up here. I've got a valve compressor rack behind that. Like I said before, this is a studio most of the time, a proper studio. And then I've got the piano keyboard in front of that, and then the Amiga in front of that. I've got no more back to front space for this size of cart. The Stereo Master, which is here, is a lot shorter. It's about half the depth. And that's why I'm using that. There's almost no difference in quality. They're both terrible. So, hey, we will use one of them today again. Right, I've put the compact flash card in, and because I have compact flash disk drivers loaded into my workbench, Amiga workbench, is installed on a hard disk, which is actually an SD card through an adapter that sits inside the Amiga here. So nice fast startup, fast saving, and a huge amount of space that would have cost hundreds and hundreds of pounds back in 1992. Now 740 megs free, and I think there's more on that card that I'm not using. Take a while to use that up. So yeah, compact flash cards here with stuff that I've just thrown in from Windows and OS X over the years, OS 10, OS, whatever, Mac OS it's called. I'm so old. Right. So I can cycle around in the rather troublesome disk up section of Protracker, which I've talked about before. I'm going to move this microphone stand. It's got a webcam gaffer tape to it because That's how we roll. See that? Oh, this is fun. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that'll do it. And I'll click this thing, which sort of I'll have to do a stream entirely on the disc up section and the pitfalls involved. That's strange. Okay, yeah. So play a tune. See if I've got a tune that I haven't played before. Oh, here's a tune. So this is a tune that I did for the demo group that I'm a member of. Uprough is a Swedish demo group, mostly focused on music, mostly focused on the Amiga, though we have done Game Boy Advance demos, for which I did a John Carpenter cover. That was fun. Look at that sometime. And lots of straight up chip tunes, lots of drum and bass, quite a bit of house as well. And we had this thing about 10 years ago. It only got released last month. I'll dig out a link for it. It was a mega mix, which was supposed to be a continuous 2-hour mix of modules being played from a hard disk, but it had to run on an Amiga 500. I think now that's been upped to 600 or 1200, or possibly an expanded 500 plus, but the limitations we were all given were you've got to make your part of this mix continue from the previous person's samples, then you add your own samples, and then do a fade out that they can pick up from, so it would be like a continuous DJ mix. But we were all composing at different times, different places, different countries, and we got it together about 10 years ago, but it didn't. The player wasn't really ready until last month, but it was worth the wait. Yeah, I'll play that and make sure everything's working. Oh, it didn't work. What have I done? That's not good. This is dreadful. Right, I'm gonna reboot. Hey, so this happens occasionally. Normally things have been going wrong with everything but the Amiga, but I think maybe some stuff hasn't copied from the compact flash code properly. So hey, let's do a bit of Mac OS or Amiga DOS stuff. Now I'm changing drive, which you put the colon after it, and you go to the drive you want, as named in the mount list. CFO is mounted as CF128. That's the name on the thing, in case you ever need to know this. And I'm just going to check. DH1 is usually the hard drive. Mine's called store. Some of the old school MS-DOS commands are the same, some are different. You find out as you go. So I want to put the file in modwork, don't I? This needs a tidy up. So I want 2009 PWS, 2019 S2 DH1 would work. That seems suspiciously fast, but hey, it's all solid state, and it's an accelerated Amiga, so it might actually have been that fast. I hope the audio is still coming through. I can't monitor the output for not complicated reasons. Basically, there's such a big lag on the processing that I'm doing that it makes it really hard to compose. So I'm monitoring direct output from the Amiga and my mic, and I'm looking at OBS, and I'm hoping that the lights are going up and that you can hear me. So let me know if that ceases to be the case. You don't actually need to do change directory, you just type in the one you want and it goes into it. Non-case sensitive, that's nice. No, nothing copied at all because there's a wildcard string that I keep forgetting. But hey, no matter, because this is the fancy Amiga that has directory opus on it. You'll recognize this as the, is it the Norton Commander style interface? This is the Amiga version of it. So we put the compact flash card on one side and we put the hard drive on the other side. I'm going to go into mod work. And we want to copy all of these over. These are some other things that I'll be using as examples, or we'll do a breakdown of some tracks that I really like by other people, or kind of highlight on a certain artist or composer. Let's copy some of this stuff, see if it works. Actually, I was going on about how cool that that mixtape house tune was. It might be so cool that it breaks Protracker. That's possible. It shouldn't, because I saved it in Protracker and optimized it in Protracker, but it's designed to use every possible available bit of RAM divided by 2. That's my limit, so that the next composer's tune can be buffered in. And I think it's even trickier than that in a way that I don't understand, about samples that don't appear in the second half of the tune get taken out of RAM and replaced by samples that are coming in from the next tune. Beautifully complicated, but it is cool, and I think the whole thing's on YouTube. I will share that link when I can find it. So if we look up here, this is great. In Amiga, you quit a program, it unloads every bit of that program from RAM, hopefully, and tells you how much you've got left. And we're back to 2 megabytes of chip mem. Chip mem is the really fast RAM that the system can access directly, DMA. And then this is other RAM that you put on expansion cards and things like that. Protracker can't touch that. And it's probably for the best, because if Protracker could touch expanded RAM, it would probably get in a fierce tangle of addresses not being where they should be and stuff like that. So I've got almost 16 useless megabytes of RAM here. But some other programs that I might want to run in the background do use that RAM. So in theory, stuff like mod2samp, which we looked at last time, which we use in the background for doing offline bounces of multiple channels into one sample. I don't know whether or not that uses fast RAM, which is actually the slow RAM, but never mind. Maybe I'll find out tonight. So this is what we copied in. Well, this is good, because Kiptron did suggest that I give it a bit of blather and play some tunes and stuff for a while before getting into the meat of it. And my hand has been forced because this all went wrong. So so the module's loading fine. And it's starting. So I'll play this through, and yeah. Tell me if the level's okay.
You can't play the
there's the loop. Most of my things loop forever. There's no natural fade point. But the point of that was it would continue into the next person's tune on the Megamix, which it did 10 years later, which is pretty cool. I think I first saw a draft of that, the Megamix app, in Malmo in Sweden in 2009. 2009, I think, Little Computer People. It was a work in progress then, and it remained so for a long time. But hey, that's awesome. So yeah, a whole bunch of stuff going on in there, some of which we'll cover in different sessions. One thing I'm pretty chuffed with is the degrading tape glitchy kind of sound that's going on there. Just mostly done, in fact, only done with Protracking effect commands. Just wobbling the pitch a bit and lots of pitch slides and things like that. Offset command is a nice one. DJ Hoffman, who was in on the last stream, used to be was it Dreamfish? Was it Dreamfish? Am I getting his name wrong? On Mono 211. He's the master of the offset command, because that lets you start a sample at any, not quite at any sample you want in the whole sound, but at any offset with quite a high degree of resolution. And that can also facilitate some of the crazy tricks. The way he packs samples in for some of his dubstep and UKG tunes and jungle tunes is amazing. We'll look at those tricks when we get to them, but tonight we're 25 minutes in, so I'll go to what tonight's meant to be about, which is doing what I'm going to call lo-fi hip-hop, even though all these channels have various names. I mean, I really like study beats because, like, yeah, as if people haven't been listening to music while they study for years, but it's nice. It's a nice thing to call something study beats. Jazz hop's a weird one, but a lot of them are very jazzy, so fair enough. I don't judge. But tonight I think I'll call it lo-fi hip-hop. So right at the top of the stream I was talking about lo-fi hip-hop in its earlier incarnations in the early 2000s as being something that was driven in some part by affordable and quite limited samplers, and the Amiga is basically an affordable and quite limited sampler. And we're going to try and replicate some of those stylistic characteristics of that lo-fi hip hop with this. I'm just looking for some. I'm just looking for some breaks. Yeah, okay, I've got some breaks. Keto, yes. Derry Girls is on tonight. I've set my VHS to record it. I was going to stream last night, and Alan Partridge was on. And yeah, I will catch up on Derry Girls as soon as we finish. Just gives me some motivation to keep this from getting too long. How are we doing on battery power on my audio interface? Okay, yeah. So this is such a crazy route and setup, but I do have a means of recording direct into the Amiga from some other sources. You can do it from stuff like an iPhone or an Android phone. It tends not to be very loud out of those headphone jacks. You've got all sorts of impedance problems. It's not the machine the sampler expects line level, and you're not. It's complicated, but the headphone out from the MacBook just jacks it hard. So like, I'm getting a pretty good signal from that. So I pressed clear before, and I said I've got a choice between song, samples, all, and cancel. This, unlike absolutely everything in Protracker, most things, but not quite everything, this works. This does what you think it'll do. I'll load up a tune again. It's probably quite a loud chip tune. So sometimes you want to steal somebody's samples or steal your own samples. That's quite a common use case. That's all this tune's made from. And we did a lot of painstaking chip sample creation last time. I'll go back and talk about that again in another session because, as Subi211 mentioned in the chat, there are easier ways to get samples, and yeah, he's quite right. The typical way would be to load in some just random binary, an executable, some data, something, and then find a shape that you like, and then offset it a few times. That's the obvious way to do it. And what I was doing was the laborious but fun way, which Andy, NE7 in the channel right here, taught me. I didn't use it way back in the day, but maybe about 15 years ago, Andy was like, "Oh yeah, you can just type that into a text editor." I was like, "Okay, of course." Andy and his magic tricks. So thank you for that. Yeah. So actually, this is a good example. You can see I have a selection of tunes here that I wrote at some point called Chip Attack, Chip Off, Chipolata, Chippopotamus, Chip Suey, and Turbo Chip, and some other ones with the word chip in. And I think I wrote one tune and then liked the samples and thought, well, I'll get some mileage out of these samples. I'll just do clear song, which takes away all the data, leaves the samples. Now we've got an empty mod full of samples ready to go. And if you want to churn out a bunch of tunes, that's the way to do it. But what I did before, and what I'll do again, is to clear. You can do the same with the samples and leave all the data there. Less useful to me, but I guess to somebody. Get rid of all of it. There we go. So let's have a breakbeat. So last time we did some sampling here. We clicked sample, which locks the mouse in place, and this is where it turns into a bit of a mystery if you're not used to it. It switches on monitoring through the parallel port, so now we can hear whatever we play into it, which hopefully is about to be a breakbeat. Yeah, okay. And we want to record it at the highest sample rate we can. I'll come out of monitoring. Not quite the highest we can. Yes, we'll do it the highest we can because that'll be the cleanest we can get it. And we probably won't want to pitch up after that. So the note at which you sample dictates the sample rate that your incoming signal will be. So if you do the highest possible note, which is B3, as your sampling note, then B3 will be the note at which you hear the sample at the pitch you expect it to be, and it will also be as high as you can get it, as high quality as you can get it in Protracker. If you then want to play that at a higher pitch, you'd have to downsample in Protracker to then play it at a higher pitch. But if all you ever want to do is play it at a lower pitch, which is usually the case, especially when we're taking a breakbeat and making lo-fi hip-hop with it, you're only ever going to down-pitch those drums. Then you might as well get it at a high sample rate. It takes up more space, but hey, we've got a lot of space. We're not trying to make a chip tune here. If it fits on an 880 kilobyte floppy disk, that's cool. If it doesn't even fit on that, it doesn't matter. It's 2019. This machine doesn't even have a floppy drive in it. It's got a magical fake USB vapor drive that pretends to be a floppy drive. So there we go. And I never use it because I haven't got time to play games, which is sad. So yeah, let's... Now, does the monitor... this is an interesting thing. Andy, you might know. Okito, does the monitoring quality change according to the note that you're sampling at? Let's find out. Nope, that didn't work. I did something. Wow, it does, yeah. So that's pretty desperate. that's at C1. That's at the lowest pitch that Protracker will play a note at. So it's at the lowest sample rate that it will record an incoming note. And it will take the least space. That's pretty cool. If you're not bothered about the quality, but we'll get it in again. We'll go up when I'm hitting F1 and F2 here. What I'm doing is changing between octaves. Now we've only really got 2 octaves. Well, we've got 3 octaves in the Amiga. The keyboard is your piano key. It's 2 rows of piano keys. So Z, S, X, D. They're your black keys along here. Your white keys along here, and the number keys are the black keys with gaps. And then so you've got 2 octaves at a time. F1 and F2 switch between lower and upper. So if you imagine that as being, you've got 3 octaves, you can only look at 2 at a time. F1 switches you between lower 2 and top 2. So back to top 2. The highest note that Protracker will deal with is B3. I've forgotten what that maps to onto an actual piano keyboard, but it's all relative to the pitch of the instrument you put in anyway, so that's okay. So yeah, let me get that monitored again at a higher sample rate. That's much nicer. So my source loops around twice with a variation on the end. Because we're recording at a higher sample rate, Protracker will switch off the sampling after a certain number of seconds. Not very many at this sample rate to save RAM. I don't know what dictates that setting, but it's probably a calculation of how much RAM it has available. Or it's just arbitrary because you never know with Protracker. So I'll just start recording by clicking the right mouse button. Of course, hey, why not make it the right mouse button? And I'll do it at about the same time as I press play on my source that's playing back the breakbeat. Oh, right. So that wasn't much good. Try that again, and I'll run the playback first, and then I'll click as soon as I want it to start recording. Right, I didn't even get the entire thing there because we're getting it at such a... But you know what? We don't need the entire break because we're going to chop it up anyway. Hey Neil. Right, well, let me see. It's DVS. This, you gave me that sticker right there. That one, that nice star. And I put it on my monitor. So there you go. Oh, it's just not working. Have we got problems? Okay, thank you. Yeah, we're back, we're good. That's probably my wife watching Alan Partridge somewhere in the house. Yeah, okay. Oh, there he goes. Right. So just for the example, if I switch that back to the default, which is C3, we get a little bit more sampling time. These are the same kind of restrictions that you would find yourself with in the late 80s and up to the late 90s on hardware samplers. So the Akai S16, for instance, which had a floppy drive and some RAM, but still would chop you off quite quickly. The SU10, which is my favorite sampler, I have 2 of them. They're fantastic. I know Kiptron used to have one. I think he used to have one. Most people had them, hated them. Yeah, got a strange affection for those. But yeah, everything was a balancing act between sampling time, quality, and in the case of the SU10, things like stereo or not stereo. Do you sample down pitch and then bring it up, or the other way around, or oh, we're getting some. No sound. 11111. I'm just going to jump back to monitoring on make sure I'm at least sending something out. Two, 1, 2, cool. Oh, the Akai, yeah. Yeah, I sold mine just before the Keto says the Akai, is it the S16 or the S20? Maybe it's the S20. Still worth the money, especially if you mod it with a new flash floppy firmware. Yeah, they became cheap and available just after I sold mine, which is a shame. But it still had its own set of limitations in the way you could map something to pitch. And what frustrated me about all of those phrase samplers, and especially in the 90s, was that you couldn't bounce on most of them. The Zoom sample track, which is quite obscure, but that did everything. It looked really weird. It looked like a daft novelty guitar pedal, but it did everything you wanted it to really well. That for a while, but I sold it because I needed food and to pay the rent. So yeah, man, Zoom stuff always good. But we're going to sample this break again at C3, which will give us a bit more time, and then at least we've got the option of going up in pitch if we want to. Let me get that plugged in again. Right, so back down to the sample monitoring. I'll run it through and then start the sample when I'm ready. So you see it went right to the end of the break there. Good 1.5 seconds extra we got out of that, which is all right. Don't need the rest of it. In fact, there's a lot of it we don't need really. Let's zoom in on here. So I'm clicking and dragging to select section. This is what you do in any modern bit of audio editing software. And it's exactly what you do in stuff like Green Eyes, which is based part of this lineage of trackers. Show range, they could have called it zoom, but they call it show range. And just to make sure you chop off what you want to chop, I'm going to select and drag that and then cut. Now it's in the buffer. If I want to paste it somewhere else, I don't. Now that's an option and it's not on by default. It is here. Cut to buff. It's off. Oh dear, right. It's on now. I keep thinking I've saved that. This might be a bug. I keep thinking I've saved that option. If that option's not saving properly, then it might be a bug in this version of Protracker. But I do have a web app called ptconfig or something. Search for echo level ptconfig. The web app lets you choose color schemes and gradients and tick all the options you want and create a config file that works with Protracker on a real Amiga. Might come in handy. So yeah, it's a pretty solid loop. Loops where we want it to. But I want to start cutting it up. We can play it back at various pitches, as you might expect. What we can do that we can't do in the average sampler of the time, or even lots of samplers now, is stuff like, let's gradually pitch it down. Over time, I'm going to run this at 4. It's all possible in other samplers, but it's harder to automate it quite the way we're doing. But we'll pick a pitch and stick with it. Anyway, we're going to chop this into the samples that we think we're actually going to use. I'm sorry, I don't know if that's a Twitch thing or a me thing or both. OBS tells me it's kicking out audio, but that's all I know. Sorry if you've missed chunks of what I was saying. I was probably repeating myself from earlier on, so hopefully you haven't missed too much. Let's start chopping this up. The first bit we want is this initial kick. Let's play the range by selecting a range here and then clicking this button here that says range. So these playback controls, play isn't actually a button, it just is a sign that says play. Play waveform is the entire thing once through, which I tend to do just by hitting a note on the keyboard. This button, which on a UK Amiga keyboard has nothing on it, there are two on a UK keyboard that have nothing on them. This one stops things from happening, stops audio, which is very handy. Let's put caps up. You'll often find, by the way, it's a good time to mention this, you'll often find that when you're hammering around in the sample edit window, playing notes on the keyboard, there are a couple of buttons you might accidentally hit on a hardware Amiga. One of them is this one, tilde, which sends you back to Workbench and is freaky. This is how to get back. Or Amiga and M will get you back. And Amiga and M will also switch active windows. So if you are doing things in the background, because this is a multitasking operating system, one of the first proper multitasking operating systems, you can jump between them like that. So the other thing that often happens is if you ended up on one of these effects column fields, these two characters here that I'm wiggling between are instrument value, that's which sample you're using, and these three are the effects commands. When I say effect, I'm talking about something that's done in software to the sample that's being played. It isn't quite DSP, it's not digital signal processing, it's not doing something, it's not doing any software mixing or synthesis really, it's just playing. All it's really altering is the sample rate, the frequency and the amplitude of the sample that's coming out. Now, a lot of these effects are very fancy and change the volume in interesting ways, modulate the pitch, so it sounds like vibrato, it sounds like chorus sometimes. But really all they're doing is changing frequency and amplitude, so pitch and volume. So when I say effect, despite having opened this series of streams by saying, oh, this thing's so basic, hasn't got any effects. No, it doesn't have anything like VST. It doesn't have anything like an actual modeled reverb or even anything like a smooth stereo pan. You can figure out how to do it manually. I'll show you that sometime, but nothing built in. And when I say effect column, I'm talking about the place where you type in those commands. And if you find yourself on one of those, you can't sound a note. And that often happens when you're in the sample edit window and you think, oh, God, why can't I hear the note that I'm playing? Usually if you hit tab, what tab does will always jump you to the next available note space on a channel. It usually won't matter which channel. Again, if you've got some channels muted, which you can do either by clicking 1, 2, 3, 4, or using Alt and then these keys, ZXCV, you can hear that clicking on and off. If you accidentally leave, so I've got 3 muted, playing some notes here, and then I'm in the sample window and I accidentally mash the keypad with a tab. Now nothing's playing. I think there's something wrong with the sample. I check the volume, it's still up. It's because I've accidentally skipped over to a channel that's muted. Easy thing if you're in doubt is just tap tab a few times until you hear something, and also take a look up at your mutes to see if the channel's muted or not. So we're back in business. I'm really making a meal of this, aren't I? Let's just get this this kick drum isolated. So yeah, we were playing the whole waveform, then we're playing the display. So if you've got a zoomed portion, you can only you can display only what's zoomed. Let's do that. In fact, let's zoom this bit, show range, and let's play what's in the display. But let's now play only what's ranged in the display. That's a good way of making sure that the end of your range is exactly where you want it to be. And that is where I want that to be. It's not, however, the bit I want to select. What I want to select is from this position to the very end. So I'm going to zoom out. Oh, that moved my position. Thanks a bunch. Right, anyway, let's try that. I was looking at the whole thing. No, I wasn't looking at the whole thing. Right. Anyway, I tend to do it a bit more haphazardly than this. I'll just do it by sight at full zoom and say, well, that looks kind of like a kick, so that'll do me. I've changed with control and the arrow keys, left and right, which is how I change which sample I'm working on. The reason I do that is because I grew up with an Amiga 600, which didn't have this numpad here, but if you do have a numpad here, you can use a numpad to select the sample. You can also use the numpad as a drum pad. There's a feature that lets you essentially play out samples at a fixed pitch with that. I've done that live at a few gigs before when I haven't had much to do, so just to look busy, I've muted a channel and given myself some samples that I can go on there, so that's handy. But I'm just using control with my little finger, slightly off camera, and going up and down the samples. So sample 2 is where I want to be. I'm going to move the marker to beg, which means beginning, which puts this green line at the start. You used to have to do that or else it wouldn't paste. This version is fixed, so that's okay. Paste it in and we should hear the whole loop except for that. Now we hear nothing because I didn't put the volume up, because every sample that you've never touched before has a volume of 0, and that is up here. You can click one at a time, or much quicker, to hold down the right mouse button and then tap left and you go in increments of 10. 4 bashes of that gets you up to the level you want. And then we're just going to go through and chop this down. So I'm going to take that just before the kick, because I don't intend to replicate the same speed and rhythm of this break. Right, I made a hames of that entirely. Absolute disgrace. So before I lose what's in the buffer, which is almost the entire break, I'm going to click end to put the marker at the end, and I'm going to click paste, and I should be right back where I was a moment ago. There's no undo here. That's the closest you get to an undo, is hoping that you've got something stored in the buffer that you cut. And let me see. So let's try and chop it again just before. Usually with drums, you can fade that a little bit, and it doesn't matter if you catch it a bit late. We'll paste that in a new there we go. We'll take that. In fact, I don't want any of this at all. I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm going to cut that. I'm going to chop this wee bit out here. And I'm going to take that and use that here. That's a little hat. There's a lot of stuff in the front of that I don't need. So I'm just running through the samples that I've chopped and trimming them down a bit. That's all you really need for lo-fi hip-hop. I'm sure I'm doing lo-fi hip-hop a disservice, but I'm keeping it simple. Next, I'm going to get something... it'll be quite hard to tell how good quality this is because it is just vinyl noise. I've got a big Foley library full of noises of one kind and another, and I've got some vinyl crackles. I'm going to find a nice one. So let's sample this at just C3 again, see what we've got. I mean, we don't need any more noise in this, but my plan is to get it loaded in, boost some of the, that's nice, boost some of the high end, really exaggerate it, and then lower the volume overall, so all you can really hear is the clicks and not just the noise beneath it. Oh, that's good. There we go, okay. So if I go to edit up, and if you remember from last time, edit up here gives us extra editing features. Some of them are for adjusting pattern data, that is the notes and the commands. Some of it is juggling around which samples are where, but then some of it is actually wave destructive stuff that's operating on the wave itself. So this kind of almost is DSP and software mixing. It's not happening live on the fly, but it's happening offline. And crossfade, which again somebody mentioned last time when I did a lazy loop. Crossfade's a good way of getting a clean loop, and we will do that in just a minute. We do need to do that tonight to make this whole thing work. Doing stuff like actually boosting the gain, the volume, not just with a command, but destructively, so that it's permanent on the sample. It's always a balancing act again between quality, but boost and filter I talked about in passing last time. Filter is a low pass or a high cut filter that can take the edge off a sample where, especially if you're recording some bass in and you get a load of extra noise in the high end just because the crappy sampler, then filter's usually a good shout on that. When there's nothing you need above, I don't know, 500k or something, then stick the filter on. Boost is very distinctive and idiosyncratic, kind of high boost. I don't think it does a low cut, but it does a sort of mid to high EQ boost, and it's great for adding snap back into drums. That, in fact, I'll use it on a. So I want to use it on here. So it's really exaggerated that high end, insofar as anything in the high end gets exaggerated on the Amiga. I'll do it on here. Normally I take a backup or a buffer copy of a sample before I do a boost on it, because you never know quite what's going to happen to it. But I'm reasonably confident it'll improve this a bit. And that just helps it cut above everything else in this fairly compressed or fairly narrow frequency range that's coming out of the Amiga. This is not high fidelity stuff. There's a DC offset in there that I can't fix on this, so I'm not going to, but hey. Yeah, so I'm going to fling the boost on the this very hipstery record noise. I don't think I can accuse a vinyl noise sample of being hipstery when I'm wearing what has been referred to as my northern beret. Yeah, okay, that's some of that noise will just disappear. I'm going to boost it again. I'm out of control, but I'm going to drop the volume a bit, so the default volume is more like this. Now it's harder to hear the noise in this sample over the noise floor that exists generally. and hopefully all we'll get from that is the peaks. So who didn't play any sample you had with the Axel F melody, whether it was drum beat or not? Give me that hi-hat and make Foley. Hey, you're absolutely right. And what was it I did on Sunday that I always do? Bronski beat, Small Town Boy. I always do that synth line on any sample I load in. And I did it. And almost tried to sing along and stopped just in time. Nobody was harmed. I'm checking my phone periodically to check the stream because I'm running things as stripped back as possible. And also, as you might know if you can see it as well, I've made a total mess of this this plugin that displays the chat. Oh, is that fixed? Is that everything? Kido, did any version of Protracker ever get an undo buffer, especially for sample manipulation? Not for sample manipulation, but this version of Protracker, which is PT 2.3e by 8-Bit Bubsy, who did an amazing job of bringing 2.3D, which is already the gold standard of Protrackers, up to date, fixing a bunch of stuff, adding some new stuff, and porting it to macOS and Windows. Did a really amazing job. And one thing he added, which I'm pretty sure wasn't there before, is an undo buffer in this bit, and the pattern entry bit. Except I got it wrong last time and it just zapped the whole pattern, or something horrible happened. So I need to learn that. But yeah, you don't get an undo buffer in sample, so you either copy the whole sample, which is what you do if you're not entirely sure, or you hope that you can keep it in the buffer if you just select the whole thing and copy it into the buffer. So let's run these. Something really basic. Firstly, I'm going to get a BPM that I think will fit. Remember, we're doing, if you've just joined us, we're going for lo-fi hip-hop / jazz hop / study beats kind of vibe, just to see if we can. I'm pretty sure we can, but I've never done it before, so it's a pleasant learning experience. So let's fire in 70 and see what that gives us. That's 112. That's a bit fast for this. I think more like 98 is what I should be looking at. Oh, so close. F62 gives us 98 BPM at a speed of F4, which is it's fast enough in terms of the actual tick count that we can get enough of the shuffle that we want. It's not so fast that our ED delay command, pattern delay commands won't work. We might not need much shuffling, depending on how tight the samples are. What is that in there? Oh yeah, put that in earlier. Don't need that. So let's get some of these drums in. Well, actually, no. Let's just loop this. Yeah. So it's not looping yet, but we need to go back to this and make it loop by clicking loop, which by default loops the whole thing. And you don't even need to tidy that up because it's vinyl noise. I might mute that while we work if it irritates me too much, but let's get some drums in. So what we could do to make this sound a bit more unnaturally natural is loop some of the noise at the very end. I don't think it'll work. I think I might have trimmed them too tight. Let's see how that sounds. Ooh, no, that does not sound good. I should have known that would not sound good. Now I think you can you fade a range and edit? Let's try that. FD should be fade down. I'm never convinced it works the way I think it's gonna do. One thing I could try is cutting the first. I don't think that. I think fade up and fade down won't work if you've got a selection made for some reason. But if we cut the first half of this sample to the edit buffer and then do a fade down on what's left, and then move the marker to the start, the playhead to the start, and do a paste, we should get a sample that fades where we want it to fade, hopefully. Hey, yeah, we do. Great. Smug face. That's okay. I wouldn't down pitch too much because I know lo-fi hip hop isn't just, hey, let's down pitch our drums and it'll be lo-fi hip hop. It's not all there is to it. Having said that, I do want these drums to be a bit lazier and more languid, I think. Notice I'm not working off any reference material here, not least because I don't want to run... Hi, James. Because I can't afford the CPU to run Chrome in the background. Let's get this whipped up into a beat. I should boost some of these. I know I boosted them, but I should balance the levels a little bit. Oh, they're okay. They're okay. So, it's a bit daft to set up your BPM without having a sense of what actual speed it's coming out at. So let's do that. And we can use F6, F7, F8, and F9 to skip between quarters of the page. F8 will take you to 32. Line 32 on a Protracking module is always exactly halfway through the page. You can't change the length of each pattern. There are commands that let you jump from an arbitrary pattern number to another pattern. So you could essentially have a tune made up of 48. You could do something in 3/4 time quite easily with 48 lines. But it's mapped out pretty nicely to the 4 quarters of this pattern. And remember last time we looked at the edit skip, which is how many lines the cursor jumps after you put in a note. That's really handy for doing things like drums. So if I put on edit skip of 8 and put in and switch it to edit mode by hitting spacebar, cursor goes blue, ready to input some notes. You'll notice I'm kind of going backwards on some things to explain things that I shouldn't take for granted everybody knows. Hammer that 8 times. Each time jumps down another 8. 8 to 64, that's how many lines we've got in a pattern. So yeah, that's I'll take my edit step back so I don't lose my place. Back to 0, Control and 0. That's edit skip. Now by default, Protracker has edit skip 1, and the reason I hacked Protracker in the first place was to try and change that default for myself to 0, because it's not a configurable thing. But it does my head in to load up Protracker and put in a note and be skipped. I don't like to be skipping automatically. Tend not to like to work like that. I just hit the arrows and do what I want to do. I often don't want to go down after I put a note in. Sometimes I want to go back and fill in a pattern delay like we did in the last string. But hey, everybody's different. That's just what I wanted to do. I'm just gonna get some general kind of I want this as sparse as possible. That's way too loud. I wish I hadn't trimmed quite as much away as I did. I don't like that, it's a bit too jumpy, but it might just have to be what we work with. Yeah, that could work, yeah. So I'm just putting in notes here that are the chopped samples from that breakbeat that I recorded. A kick here, a cymbal, a hat, another kick, snare, another hat, and the noise. That's all we've got so far. We'll get onto some nice melodic and harmonic stuff soon. I think I want to keep this even more basic than it is, because like that basic. A lot of the gaps there will be filled in by other things that are going on. And there's another reason to keep the drums quite basic in this, which we'll come to in just a moment. So here I'm doing a mark block. Mark block is Control and B, which starts mark block mode 0 0 to 0 0, and use the arrow keys to mark as many rows as you want. Typically, if I'm doing something like double in a drum pattern where I've gone to line 32 and I want to duplicate the whole thing, I'll do the Control B and then I'll tap up, which loops me back around to the bottom of this pattern to line 63, or the 64th line, because the first one is 0, remember, because maths. And I'll copy the whole thing, Control C, including the empty stuff, that doesn't matter. Now I'm going to use these F keys again to jump to F8 and paste it in. So the whole process is pretty quick. It's Control B up, Control C, F8, edit mode, Control P, pastes it in, and then you can jump back to make sure it's gone in where you expected it to make sure you're not duplicating a command that you don't want to duplicate or anything like that. But it's cool, we're good. So we probably want another so just for a bit of variety, I think I'll throw in EC2 is a note cut command. That didn't work. I think I'll put that there, that kick, and then I'll get rid of that horrible thing that I did there that doesn't work. That'll do for now, because we're going to move on to there are things I would tweak in that. I would go back and may at some point go back and tweak. I'll tell you what I haven't been doing. I haven't been saving, and you've got to be saving all the time. All the time. So let's have a song name. So again, the Amiga usually doesn't care what your file extension is, especially not if it's at the end, which is where we normally put file extensions these days. Sometimes it cares and it wants it at the start, mod dot something. For the avoidance of doubt, I always name works in progress mod dot tune name dot mod. If I copy that back onto a PC or a Mac, my software in there can find it easily, and all that. Go to disk up, and we're gonna save this, and I'm gonna make absolutely sure it's gonna save, because it's not always a sure thing. When you think you click and save, sometimes that's not what's happening. I'm just checking the chat. Am I still? Yeah. So yeah, that's saved. Should have been doing that all the way through. Very bad of me. Yeah, let's get a new sample in, and we're going to sample this again at C3. This is going to be quite a bit longer. We might even have to go down for this to A2. Let's try that. That might give us the kind of length we want. Here's the QY again, and I'm going to find an electric piano on here. Oh bother. Yeah, there we go. Don't need that. I want to take the reverb off, so I don't need that, and I want the volume as high as possible. It's still not really high enough on this thing, but we'll try and boost it a bit anyway. Effects, send reverb send down to 0. We make our own reverb around here. We don't need Yamaha's crappy reverb. Sorry, Yamaha, it's awesome reverb. And let's see what we can find in the way of. Well, we won't hear anything until we start to monitor it. There we go. There's the DX. Yamaha fill everything with DX sounds, because why wouldn't you? But I want something a bit more EP, a bit more Rhodesy. The chorus is good. I think that so what I would do here, if it was a jungle tune or something, I would just bash the sample in, the chord, as long as I could get it, trim it down. What we're going to do for this one, because it's lo-fi hip-hop jazz hop study beat thing, is to try and get a bit more of an expressive kind of fluidity, such as a pianist might use if they were going to record something that 20-30 years later would be nicked by somebody on SoundCloud for a study beats tune. So I'm going to do that. Just enough in it that it's not just a broken chord. The really tricky thing is you can't waste any time clicking the right mouse button to start the sampling on the Amiga side and then leaping over here and trying to remember what the hell tiny rubber keys you were going to play. So you have to do it. I mean, let's see if this works. I'm going to try and start it with my little finger by right-clicking the mouse and then getting it in. So let's see. No, didn't click it. All right. That's more sampling time than I was expecting. Sounds nice enough. Now, before I go any further, I'll get a new sample and I'll do another one. It's slightly different articulation. We're not going by any means for sampling all the phrases of a full tune. That's kind of daft. It's not what this format's for. It's not what this format excels at. it's better to throw in a few things and then chop them about and then find new stuff you can do with them, usually. If you have an idea of a composition and you want to present it as is, then you shouldn't be using an Amiga for that, because, you know, modern DAWs have got your back. Yeah, okay, something like that. There we go. Cool. Paul Simon would be rolling in his grave, but he's not dead. It's cool. Right. Don't need that for now, I don't think. I'll need some bass from somewhere later on. Maybe from that, maybe from something else. Might use the Volca FM for that. Anyway, this is about the Amiga. First things first, let's get these samples trimmed. So if I've got samples from, multiple samples from the same source, usually I try to be quite diligent about the way I boost them and treat them. So typically I'll use my right click to get my increments of tens, and I'll do up to, oh, it didn't work again. I think the right click's dodgy on this mouse. Okay, right click, there we go, 120. 120% is the, what I like to use for boosting a sample, so for increasing the volume in the sample, not boosting, because that means a different thing in here. I'd love it if the Key Y70 put out a much harder signal than this, but it doesn't. But it doesn't matter because we're doing lo-fi hip-hop, and I don't care if the noise floor is quite high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's noisy, but hey, I don't care. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's pretty noisy as well. I also don't care. So yeah. Actually, that probably is too noisy to loop nicely. I'm gonna copy the whole thing and see how it behaves with a bring the volume up. See how it behaves with a filter. It takes a bit of that out, but it leaves that crunch in, which I don't mind today. So I'm gonna zap that. Go back here. So the worst of that is gone now from there. Well, I think we've got a hook there. There's no, I mean, I've been going for almost an hour and a half, so I might as well speed this up. Actually, it goes on long enough that we don't need to loop it. Let's see how this sounds. Okay, so that's a thing, and what we'll do now is I'll check the chat to make sure I'm not missing any questions. Don't think I am. Tell me if you think I am. I think we're all good. yes, the next bit is the thing that really is the thing that leaps out at you about this style, the study beat lo-fi hip-hop style, which is the excessive sidechain compression. Now, this is a whole thing for the last, particularly for the last 10, 15 years. Sidechain compression used to be the best kept secret for a whole number of reasons. I'm using it right now so that my voice can cut in over. I haven't used it much, but in theory, my voice should cut in over the playback here. Ducks down according to this RMS loudness of my mic. Ducks the output level, or actually controls a compressor on the Amiga. Producers use it all the time. I use it in audio post and all sorts of things, voiceovers. And a load of people groan when they hear it overused in pop music or hip hop or anything like that. I love it. I don't care. It's great. It's got to the point where it is essentially a musical characteristic. It's a studio utility being used for a musical purpose, which is great. Anything you can use musically that might not have been intended to be used musically is cool. So it's a distinctive thing, and guess what? We haven't got a sidechain compressor in here because that's the kind of thing you do with either DSP or racks of hardware. And I've got a hardware compressor with a sidechain next door. I was going to use it for my voice, but I found another solution. But because of the way the Amiga works, you couldn't even easily do that. It's possible, but not really straightforward to do that for a live show on the Amiga. You'd have to make some pretty serious decisions about which channel, left or right, you wanted your audio to come out of, and 2 tracker channels would have to go in each of those, and then you'd have to decide which is. I've thought about this a lot. It's not worth the effort, but hey, don't need to worry about it because we can do sidechaining in Protracker with the effects commands. Because effectively, sidechaining, I'm going to swap. What I'm doing now is I'm swapping this F04 command to a different channel because I just want it moved out of the way so I can put something else in its place. A lot of that goes on. A lot of effects juggle in. That is the speed command. If you remember, we've got 2 speed commands at the start of a module. One of them sets the rate, the tick rate, which is tedious to explain, but it is the rate at which these lines go past. That is slightly independent from. It's actually about the V-blanking rate, which is how often the cathode ray tube would fire across the screen and update on the original monitors, and is now replicated on LCD. But I said it would be tedious. We have BPM runs from I think F20 or F24 up to F127, I guess, which is F. Let me see, actually. Yeah, 255. Yeah, 255 BPM is the maximum we can get to. But we can go faster than that if we increase the speed, because that increases. That's like a multiplier for the rate that the pattern is worked through against the V-blank timing of the graphics output of the Amiga. So yeah, we can go quite a lick there, but we're not doing that. We're having a nice time in 98 BPM land, like this. Yeah, that's where we live tonight. And we've got no compressor or anything, but what we can do is, remember I said that basically all the effects can do for you in real time when the module's playing back is adjust the pitch or the volume. So we're going to adjust the volume, and we're going to do it by hand. Every time there's a kick or a snare, we're going to put in a volume command on the pad sound, on the EP pads. Drop it to C10, which is a quarter of its full volume. Now, default, it's going at C40. We're going at C10. And then immediately we're going to bring it up with a fast volume slide, AA. 2 just to make sure we get right up to full volume again. I'm going to try not to play this back until I've put them all in to see if it has a noticeable effect. And I'm also going to try and remember which one's my, yeah. So I'm doing that as far as I can for all of these. So normally you wouldn't have the hi-hats triggering your compressor, your sidechain compressor, even in lo-fi hip-hop or study beats, because it would be pumping all over the place and it would make it unlistenable. They do have some restraint in that scene. And let's do another one here. C, volume control 10, C10, and AA. Volume slide is quite a low resolution thing. There is a fine volume slide that's hidden away in a different effect where you can do much finer increments of volume over time. A is quite low res, so it's quite steppy. It's smooth, but you don't get that many divisions. If you're running fast and you do an A1 or an A01, it'll still adjust your volume maybe quicker than you'd like to if you wanted to do a really gentle fade in. So yeah, if you're so the name of the effect or the letter of the effect goes in this, which is the first of the 3 in the effects track. They're squished together, but just trying to remember that those 2 are for the instrument numbers and these 3 are for the effect. The name or the identification of the effect goes in here. Usually, well, it is always a letter or a number. And then for the A, anything in the first one is a volume slide up, and anyone in the second one is a volume slide down. So if that is 0 and that is 3, and you have a few of those in a row, then every line there will be a volume slide down of 3 units. Now we're bringing that volume up. So that's like the fast release of a compressor after it's been triggered by one of the samples. And one here as well to see. Happen twice there. We might need to tweak that, so I'm not sure that'll work. Might use a bit of artistic license to make it pump differently. Let's hear it. It doesn't sound that distinctive, actually. You could absolutely take the piss by doing C08 and then spending more time bringing it up again. Say by doing so that really ducks it down, and then 3 A's, 6. It also our EP samples fade quite quickly. If it was a continuous pad, you'd really hear them thumping and coming back in, or pumping and coming back in. But I think it gets the message across. So I'm going to go and change all of these. Oops. All of these C commands to 08. And all these A's to 6's, and add another one if I can, if there's space for it. I might keep that one. That's squeezed between 2 other commands, so I might make that come back as fast as I can, or pretty fast. I thought this would be a bit more dramatic, and I think I might replace these samples and see if I can make it a bit more dramatic, because I don't think we're quite there yet in replicating this sound. one thing we could do is try our hand at, even though they're quite noisy, so there again I didn't have a note until I tabbed to a channel that did have a note on it. So let's try looping some of this. It will be a bad loop because it will always be going slightly down in volume, like that. So I'm going to cut this off it, and we're going to say that roughly speaking, this is the loop we want from here to the end. I'm going to try and remember that 4792 is the point at which I want to paste it. Don't think it matters actually because I'm going to cut. So I'm going to cut that out, go to a spare sample slot here, I'm going to paste it in, and I'm going to go to X fade and the extra edit options up here, which does a crossfade. Duplicates it, reverses one, puts them together, mixes them back again, and sounds pretty chill by itself. Range all, cut back to the sample that we chopped it out of, and put the marker at end, and then do a paste. What did I say? 497? I can't remember what I said it was. It's 4 something, 47, somewhere around here. 4792 maybe. So now I'll bring the volume of this section up a bit. Oh shite! Excuse my language. Yeah, I thought that only operated on the bit that you've got selected, but that was foolish of me. So I'm going to take that out. I'm going to put it back in here in our spare sample area, sample slot. God, that's about as much as I can bump that without it getting unlistenable. Range all, cut. Let's stick it on the end here. Oh God, it's grim. But it's what we've got for now. At least it will show us whether that effect works. It's a little bit smoother. It sounds like it's being modulated and that maybe it was done like this on purpose. And hey, if somebody thinks that, we've won. Because remember, there's no such thing as cheating. Or lying. What you hear is what you hear. Like it or not. So my hand has been forced. I'm going to bump the volume of this up. I should have done this crossfade before bumping the volume up, but there we go. I'm going to get rid of the quietest stuff because that's the stuff that's struggling the most with this. So. Might try and make the loop a bit shorter on a cleaner area just as a proof of concept. To see if we can do this a bit more smoothly. So I'll trim away that excess that we don't need. I'll make a mental note of where we're repeating that. Let's call it 3 BBO. And let's get the range from there to the end. Let's cut it out just to be sure. Let's paste it in here. So crossfading also reduces the volume, which I always forget. Makes sense because otherwise it might clip if it was crossfading something that was already at, normalized to peak. So crossfade is probably reducing the volume by about half. Maybe a bit more than that. I'm going to risk, no, I'm not going to risk anything. I'm going to range all and I'm going to copy and then I'm going to risk doing another volume on it. I don't normally do this, go to eat a third temporary sample, but I'm curious. I think I'll go with the one that I just increased by 150. I've got the other one there if I change my mind. I'll put the marker to the end and I'll paste. I'll enable the loop. 4 BB, was it 3 BBO? That should still be the one we want. I never normally go as accurate as this. That was the repeat, wasn't it? It wasn't the... oh, it doesn't matter. All right. There we go. If we get it just on the right side of where the crossfade meets itself in the other direction, then with a bit of jiggling around, you can get a reasonable sounding loop, even from a pretty poor source. Keto, yeah, shows you in real time. I like it that you can drag the loop marker and it shows you in real time what the loop point sounds like. Yeah, that has always been the plan in Protracker. It didn't always work, and that was one of the biggest bugs in 3.15 and 3.61. That was one of the many things that would crash them regularly. The loop point stuff was all over the place. If you were lucky, it would just not let you hear the loop with a live update. If you're not so lucky, it would just, as soon as you started to adjust the loop while you're playing, it would just die. So let's now, did we record? No, we didn't record new ones. We went back and changed the loop points. And remember, we've got 2 samples playing essentially 3 notes, and I'm hoping that the effect of this artificial sidechain that we've been doing by hand, manually, note by note, will be a bit more profound. We'll see. It's a bit scrappy. That's a very noisy sample. If I could trust OBS to keep running while I ran a nice sampled, a nice soft synth in the Amiga, I would do that, but I can't trust it to do that. I might have some samples I can just play back, just to show you what it would be like to get a decent quality sample played out of here. Got lots of, what have I got? This is my my work sample library, which is pretty huge. What I could do is just go straight into my good old Jungle Warfare 0G sample packs. See what I can find there. There must be some jungle ammunition, Jungle Warfare pads. There we go. So let's see if any of these jungle pads are gentle enough to use in this context. I think some of them should be. So we're monitoring again, which is why the noise just kicked in, because the noise suddenly went louder than the noise gate I've got running on Twitch. Oh, that's a lovely jungle pad. I mean, that's a pretty good lo-fi hip hop pad. I'm gonna try and get that sampled. Now, I wonder if it's... I don't know why it sounded so ropey. It shouldn't have sounded that ropey. Maybe it's just the level isn't... The output level isn't hot enough. Also, I'm running it from a headphone jack, so impedance is all over the place. This is not ideal. And I'm not going to be running hardware every time on this show, this stream, by the way. I'm going to be running emulators sometimes, and I'm going to be running things where all you have to do is drag a sample and drop it, and it converts it, and you're ready to go. And it's pretty noise-free, and life is easy and good, and you can dispense with all of this. And yeah, you're right, LTJ, book 'em all the way. That one, beautiful. So that's pretty gnarly, but it's nice. Filter on that, I think. Sounds nice and radio-y. I'll swap that in. Get the loop on it. So I'm just going to take the end off it there. I'm going to crossfade it in place. Not perfect, but it'll do. Try and get some of that volume back. Again, just for curiosity, I'm going to sample that at a much higher quality, probably much shorter as well. I'm going to go for A3, and I'll see what kind of quality we can get out of it. I think it's just a pretty ropey pad to begin with. Maybe it was just clipping a bit. Hell's teeth. Right. I'm going to unplug my mouse for a second and plug it in again because it's one of those kind of nights.